Hi everyone. So this is gonna be my first podcast. Obviously, I don't really know what I'm doing, so I'm just gonna try my best. I made some notes here. So today I'm gonna talk about the fights last week, and then I'm also gonna talk a little bit about who I am because I haven't really said. And my plan is, so right now it's Saturday, and the fights are going on. I'm gonna basically come back on Sunday or Monday and then talk about the fights that just happened. That being the Jailton Almeida versus Rosenstrike card. So last week we had UFC 289, and to be honest, it wasn't the best card. It was actually kind of dwarfed a little bit by the one card, where we had Demetrius Johnson, we had Rotang fighting, and then in the UFC, especially on the main card, there was a lot of decisions. The top two fights weren't great. Obviously, Gilbert got injured, which is not ideal. And then the main event was against two fighters who are not necessarily fan favorites. It was a close fight, but at the same time, a lot of people kind of agreed that Aljamain won. There's been kind of a lot of talking recently about the fight itself, something that happened in the fight, where Aljamain would kind of be on all fours, and Henry would have his hand like on Alja's head posting. A lot of people are saying basically, oh, this is why knees should be allowed, and regardless of what you think about if knees should be allowed or not, if soccer kicks should be allowed or not, if knees were allowed, like that wouldn't happen. Aljamain wouldn't sit there on all fours. He's doing that because knees aren't allowed, and it's not really a bad position for him. In my opinion, I think it's kind of on Henry Cejudo because Aljamain is kind of stopping Cejudo from taking Aljo's back. So either Cejudo can just create space and let Aljo get up, or what you can do is threaten chokes, which to me at least seems like the most like the best option. But he wasn't doing it. It might be because of a potential hole in Cejudo's game where he's obviously got brilliant wrestling, but doesn't have much in the submission game, which is I think it's kind of a bit of a trend among like really strong wrestlers. You saw it with Usman as well, where like in the second fight with Leon Edwards especially, where Leon is like turning his back to get up, Usman doesn't chase the back. Where if you get like a good jiu-jitsu guy who maybe isn't the best wrestler, they would 100% take advantage of that position. It might be a bit of a flaw with these kind of American style wrestlers where they've obviously wrestled well and wrestling is great in MMA, but they don't have the kind of technique to chase submissions, especially when like good positions are presented to them. With these new point systems where damage trumps control, sometimes wrestling just isn't enough. You need to threaten submissions, you need to do ground and pound as well. My main point being that Aljamain Sterling kind of took advantage of the rules in terms of knees not being allowed, so he kind of let himself be in that position. And I do think that Henry Cejudo maybe could have chased submissions a little bit more. I understand that it's Cejudo who's probably the best submission artist in the bantamweight division, but I still think that at least threatening submissions might not make Aljo just sit there like he did during the fight. So it's pretty clear that Aljamain Sterling versus Sean O'Malley is going to be the next fight, which I actually think is pretty entertaining. We know kind of the nature of the fight. It's going to be Aljo trying to get takedowns and do stuff on the ground, and it's going to be Sean O'Malley who wants to keep things on the feet and strike. The fight is interesting to me because Sean O'Malley, when we see fighters like Chito Vera and Piotr Jan, especially Piotr Jan, where for like the first half of the fight they don't throw any strikes, we've seen with Jan recently that it's lost him the fight. Like in the second Aljamain Sterling fight, he took so long to kind of get into the fight, where by the time it was round 4 and 5 where he started winning the fight, it was too late. Sean O'Malley, in my opinion, is kind of similar to Chito Vera, but the main difference is that Sean O'Malley he'll be offensive early on. He'll go for it straight away. Where with Cheeto, he likes to do what Jan does and kind of sit back for the first couple rounds and pick his shots. Where O'Malley will kind of force the exchanges more, but when he does force the exchanges, he still does keep it clean, and he still looks like a sniper out there. The reason why it might be a more interesting fight is because with Jan, where he took so long to kind of get into the fight, he ended up losing the fight because he took so long to get into it. I don't think Sean O'Malley has that process. He's got first round finishes, and we've seen he's not really a slow starter, which I think against Aljamain Sterling will work better for him, because Aljamain Sterling, I think what Aljamain Sterling will do, obviously it's early days, but he's probably going to do kind of the similar thing to what he did with Corey Sandhagen, where he doesn't really want to be on the feet and he just wants to kind of bum rush Sean. With both Jan fights where Jan is taking a while to settle in and Aljamain Sterling is being hyper aggressive, he likes to kind of push the pace early in the fight to kind of force exchanges because that's the kind of fighter he is. He's a little bit messy in some cases. So I think that the fact that Sean O'Malley doesn't take so long to kind of work his range and everything, I think it's gonna actually serve him better than if a guy like Petr Yan fights Sterling. And then we go to the co-main event, which was Belal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns. I don't really get why it was 5 rounds, to be honest, and I think everyone kind of collectively wishes it wasn't. Some reports have come out of Gilbert Burns where he's got like a load of injuries, and he obviously hurt his arm or his shoulder like pretty bad during the fight, which kind of meant that he wasn't 100%. And Gilbert already doesn't have the most diverse striking game. He's got like a jab, a overhand, and a leg kick. So with his arm being injured, that's like a third of his striking taken away. Belal Muhammad basically he kind of just controlled the fight really. He switched stances a lot, which seemed to bother Gilbert Burns, but overall it just wasn't the best fight because Gilbert couldn't really initiate much action because I think the switch stances were bothering him because he throws overhands where he likes to go over the guard, and with Belal constantly switching stances, it makes it more difficult to aim up the overhand because the kind of arm or the shoulder that you're going over is constantly changing. Gilbert also doesn't seem to be able to see punches coming very well, especially from southpaw. So that might have been a reason that Belal was going to southpaw and switching stances a lot more than usual. Obviously, the fight wasn't great, and to be honest, it's kind of on Belal Muhammad because if you've got a guy who's injured, I mean, obviously Belal doesn't know the extent of Burns' injuries, but in the fight it was pretty obvious that Burns had hurt his arm and he wasn't being the fighter that he usually is. In my opinion, I think that Belal, he's been calling for a title shot for like a long time, but it's reasons like this that he doesn't get one. You've got a fighter who's not 100%, who's diminished, who's injured, and you're just kind of controlling him. You're not fighting, Obviously, it's easy for us to say, sat on the couch watching UFC, but if you've got a fighter that's injured, that's a perfect time to kind of open up a little bit like he did against Sean Brady, We saw that fight and we thought, oh, maybe Belal isn't as like boring as we thought. But either way, it looks like he's going to get a title shot finally after Colby Covington does. But by the time that Colby Covington's back and he fights Leon Edwards, I'm pretty sure the winner of that fight is going to want to take time off. So it doesn't really look like it's happening anytime soon. But to be honest, I don't really think that like a lot of people are that bothered about it. He hasn't fought in over a year, but Dana White seems like very set on having Colby Covington as the next title contender, and a lot of people are giving him a lot of criticism, which is fair because you should give the title shot to people who want to fight, but at the same time it's like there's a reason he wants Colby Covington fighting for the belt and potentially having Colby Covington as champion. To sort of sum it up without like talking about it for ages, Colby Covington hasn't fought in over a year, and people are still talking about him now. If Belal Muhammad took a year off, I don't think he would get kind of the same talk about him like Colby does. So over to the one championship, we had Rodtang fighting, which a lot of people really like Rodtang, and it's understandable why he puts on exciting fights. He goes for the finish. His fight was a little bit strange because the same instance where he would catch a teep and he would go for a left hook and then the other guy would throw an elbow. That exact exchange would happen it happened like 4 or 5 times in a 1 round fight, which was a little bit strange to see, especially with such high level fighters. the exact same exchange happening over and over, and it was like a specific exchange as well. It was catching the teep, throw a left hook, and then throw an elbow, and then after like the fourth or fifth time, Rotang picked up on it, and he kind of he sort of blocked the elbow, but he also kind of blocked it with his face, you know, not like his face, but like his head. But Rotang kind of does it. Um, and then he threw his own elbow and got a pretty nice knockout. So I'm a fan of Rotang and I like his style. But what I think about him is he's kind of fortunate that he's a flyweight and he doesn't, he's not fighting like Ngannou's because of his fighting style where he walks forward a lot and people who walk forward naturally just get hit more. In my opinion, he's kind of fortunate that he's not fighting at heavyweight or middleweight, you know? If he was fighting 4 ounce gloves against, like, Sergey Pavlovich, or even against, the middleweights like Adesanya and people that size who carry that much power, I don't think his style would translate so well at those weight classes. But he's at flyweight and he's entertaining to watch and he wins fights, so you can't really criticize him. And then in the main event, we had Moraes versus Demetrius Johnson 3, where the fight, the same as kind of, it wasn't the most like action packed fight in the world. It was a lot of clinch knees where Moraes, he almost didn't really look like he knew what to do. And Mighty Mouse, who's good with knees, just kept on throwing him the entire fight. But like I said, I won't like talk about it loads because loads of people are talking about it. Obviously, this podcast is new. It's not really a podcast to be honest. I'm not gonna like sit and talk for an hour because I just couldn't do that. But if you hate the video, then maybe if everyone hates it, then maybe I won't do too many. But it's just a trial period. We'll see. The last thing I'm gonna talk about before I wrap this up is it's about me actually because I haven't really spoken about me so far. And then I'm also gonna recap the fight night that just happened. So my YouTube name is Mamba Toddy because well, two reasons. Because Mamba MMA was already taken by like a bigger channel, and I get called Toddy at the gym, so it makes sense. My name's Todd. I'm 19. I am upcoming MMA fighter, shall we say. I've had a K1 fight and a boxing fight where it's white collar, which if you're in like the US, it basically means like it's amateur like level, so you wear like shin guards and stuff and the rounds are 2 minutes. But it's not as like heavily regulated as amateur where you have to wear like head guards and you're matched by like these officials or whatever. I don't really know about amateur, but what white collar is similar to amateur, where you'll get matched with someone with a similar amount of level, and then you fight. In both of my fights, I got a stoppage in the third round. Where in my kickboxing fight, my first one, um, he kind of hit me in the face, and I sort of lost composure a little bit because in my mind I was like, this looks really bad for the judges. I'm also in Wales, and I was fighting a Welsh guy, which wouldn't have helped like the decision. So in my mind, I was like, I just have to like go for it. I just have to land, like for every one punch he lands, I have to land like five, and I just have to go for it. It wasn't my most technical fight because we had this like game plan where I was gonna kick his leg, and then set up a high kick and do all this other stuff. But then when I actually got in there, he hit me in the face once, and I just like completely lost it. I just started like walking in the punches, chasing him down, doing all that stuff. Um, he ended up landing a nice head kick, which I'm not gonna lie, it really hurt me. And there was a point where I tried to throw a counter, and it was like a really rubbish counter because I was a bit wobbly, and he just cracked me in the face. So then I kind of just guarded up, and it was the end of the round. Because I was a bit all over the place, I thought it was like a standing 8 count, So the third and final round comes around, and it's sort of just the same thing. It's a bit sloppy, but I'm just doing work. And I got told, like, if you drop someone 3 times within a round, it's automatically like a kind of like a finish. So what happened is I basically dropped him. I dropped him with like a cross and then a right hook, some southpaw. It was quite a nice It was a nice punch. I'm not gonna lie. I'm happy with it. And I dropped him, and then after he gets back up, I kind of chase him down, and I drop him again. And then I look at my corner. I'm like, that's twice. That's twice. I get him one more. That's it. But then as he got up, he kind of shakes his head, and the fight's over. But and then oh yeah, and then I do a little spinny jump, and I crouch down on the floor, and I start crying. But yeah, it was worth it going through like losing loads of weight and like getting, it was a very difficult fight. But in a way, I kind of think that made it sweeter when I finally won. Um, it's probably one of the best days of my life. I'm not gonna lie. If ever like I don't feel like training or like I'm like ugh, don't want to do this. I kind of watch like a video of the fight, and just like the way it makes me feel, it's like I want to chase that feeling again. Um, maybe I'll talk about the boxing fight in like another podcast because that kind of drew on a little bit. So my makeshift plan right now is basically I've done this part of the podcast. It's currently Saturday, and the prelims of Almeida versus Rosenstryker are now. What I'm gonna do is I'm basically gonna come back and like tomorrow or day after, and then I'm basically gonna talk about the fights that just happened, anything noteworthy, and then I'm gonna upload this. So I kind of have like a recap of the fights that just happened, if that makes sense. And hello, I'm back. I hope the audio isn't too like annoying to listen to. It's currently Sunday. The UFC happened. It was actually on a good time for the UK, but my BT Sports decided to mess up and I couldn't watch it. But I watched it Sunday morning, and I've got a couple things that I thought, a couple like things that stuck out for me, and I'm gonna go through them, and then that's gonna be the end of the first episode of the podcast. And yeah, the first fight that I saw was probably one of the worst fights I've ever seen in my life, where it was Kim versus Boom. I don't know their first names. I don't really care. But Kim was like kind of, she was kind of just letting Boom do what she wants, and her corner were like screaming at her and stuff to like fight, but she was kind of just letting herself be controlled. And then in the third round, she has Boom against the fence, and her corner is like screaming at her to basically like let go, you know, stand in the distance and strike because that's where she was doing the best. So she thinks, okay, and then knees her opponent in the face and ends up ending the fight because of it. And then for literally like 10 minutes after the fight, the judges and like officials and whatever were like talking about it, and they ended up going to a decision with Boom winning by split decision. I don't really like it when the fight ends because of a foul, but they go to a decision anyway. But that was just, it was a really like stupid fight, and it was a really bad fight. And then the fighter that won, who won basically, she basically won by disqualification. She was there like trying to like be all tough and like flex and stuff, and it was just really stupid. And then Carlos Ulberg fought. He trains with like is Adesanya and Volkanovski and all those. I thought he looked pretty good. He got a KO in round one. I think he fought the guy that fought Shogun Rua last, and like kind of like danced after KOing him in Brazil, and it was kind of a bit uncomfortable for everyone. But he got a good KO. It kind of reminded me of when Volkanovski fought Max Holloway the third time, where he was kind of the entire fight he was circling in the same direction, and just every single time what the other guy would come in, he would just land a counter, and then eventually Olberg just lands a hook, and it doesn't even look like it hits him very cleanly, but it kind of hits him on like the back of the head, and then he just goes down. But that was a good KO. We had a lot of people are quite high on Ian Gary at the moment, which is good, which is justified. He fought Daniel Rodriguez, and he got a head kick in round one. It was a little bit like when there's a lot of instances where people will throw like a jab cross head kick, and what happens is I talked about this in the Leon fight where like the opponent will throw a jab, and then what usually comes after a jab is a cross. So then they'll kind of counter the cross, but Rodriguez kind of leant back, but then that kind of sets him up for the head kick, and it's an effective combo. They were also in an open stance as well, where kicks from the rear side do just get through better. What basically happened is Rodriguez leaned back and he got caught sort of on the end of the kick. It's similar to Usman versus Leon Edwards, but Usman kind of slipped into the shot, which increased the impact quite a lot, and D Rod leaned back, which it's still it's not as bad as leaning into it, but it was enough to finish him. And Ian Gary, I believe, is now going to be ranked, and he looks pretty good. He'll be fighting someone probably in the top 10 next, and we can see how it goes from there. And in the co-main event, we had Johnny Walker and Anthony Smith. It was a bit of a weird fight, but I actually thought Johnny Walker looked quite good, and he looked like he could kind of take punches a bit better than he's used to, which is good for him to see. I don't really like it when fighters, when their chin is like clearly gone and they just get slapped in every single fight, because it makes you quite concerned for the fighter's health. But it's good to see that he didn't just get put out with a flick in the face, you know. Johnny Walker was looking for the teep a lot, which you don't really see in MMA very often. And for whatever reason, when I spar people, they always teep me, and I always hate it. But you don't really see it in MMA. He was looking for the teep from his back leg, which is a little bit more uncommon. People, especially sort of in Muay Thai, like to teep with their front leg, and they kind of hop into it. But he was teeping, and it was landing, and by the end of the fight, Anthony Smith looked completely exhausted, and I reckon that was probably because of the teeps. Towards the end of the fight, they were both pretty gassed out, but Anthony Smith was kind of more. He looked absolutely exhausted. Um, he Johnny Walker's kind of weird punching technique, as the fight went on, he kind of slowed down a little bit. Smith could kind of see the weird punching technique, and he could kind of see the punches coming. He doesn't throw his punches very cleanly or very straight, so they were kind of getting deflected. And later on in the fight, the only thing that Johnny Walker was really landing was leg kicks, and he was throwing like he was doubling them up, where he would throw two in a row, which again you don't see very often, but it looked to be pretty effective. And by the end of the fight, like I said before, Anthony Smith was just at the end of the fight he was kind of just a walking punch bag, and he was leaving his body very open. And I was thinking like, if Johnny Walker kind of landed a really solid body shot, I think he probably could have finished the fight. But yeah, he won a decision, which is not, he doesn't win this by decision very often. And I actually do think he looked pretty good for Johnny Walker. In the main event, Jalton Almeida, he kind of just ran through Rosenstruik, just took him down, controlled him, choked him out. Um, Rosenstruik he just looked like a fish out of water. Just, you know, he might have seen the takedown coming, but just didn't defend it very well. And then when it was on the ground, he kind of just didn't really look like he knew what he was doing. Um, it looks now. It kind of looks like the time is changing a little bit for heavyweight, where these more skilled guys are beating just the power punchers. A few years ago, and kind of throughout heavyweight history, where power punchers have just KO'd everyone. There's these new fighters which are a little bit younger who are using technique, and often they're also a little bit smaller. Almeida's only about 230 pounds, which isn't huge for heavyweight. but it's just showing kind of the turning of the times where technique is beating power even at the most powerful weight class. I spoke a lot about this when I was talking about Jon Jones in my first video, where because he's used to fighting light heavyweights and he's used to fighting fighters that are so skilled, that's going to help him at heavyweight where fighters are not skilled. When there's such a big skill gap, the power advantage really isn't as important because there's no point having power if you can't land anything. You've got this newer crop of heavyweights, like I guess Jon Jones. You've got Cyril Gane, who's very technical on the feet, and then this Jailton Almeida. But then you do have Sergey Pavlovich, who just KOs everyone. So maybe power punches still have a bit of a chance. But yeah, that's pretty much that. Those are the key points I took from the fight night. It was a pretty good fight night. There were a couple finishes, kind of a better card than what we've been seeing recently. And then going forward, the cards don't look great, but sometimes the lesser known cards tend to be better. One more thing about Jailton Almeida, he's about 230 pounds, which if you don't know, that's what Alex Pereira weighs when he's like not training or not out of camp, which is kind of crazy since he literally fights at middleweight. I know he's saying he's going up to light heavyweight, but there's also a picture of those two. I'll try and put it up, but they look the same size. It's crazy. But then yeah, that's gonna be the podcast. A lot of people are talking about fights, so I only really want to make videos about fights from like my own perspective. I don't really want to just like tag along to what everyone else is saying. So that's going to be the first podcast. If you sat through the entire podcast, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Currently have 16 subscribers right now, so if you're watching, you're a subscriber. Appreciate you. If you like the podcast, let me know. If there's something you don't like about it, let me know. Comment. It'd be appreciated. Obviously, this is the first podcast. It's probably not going to be great, but you got to start somewhere. I'm currently sort of early days working on my next video, so that will be out within within a few weeks. So watch out for that. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Hope maybe I have like a different perspective than someone else. Maybe I don't know. But thank you very much for watching the video, and I will see you next time.